Today I'm making a nice Burl box with the Blackwood detail in the join and on the lid, so I hope you enjoy this video. Thank you for watching. Okay, today I'm going to turn a box, a little lidded container. I'll give you close-ups in this camera right here. I did this yesterday and I thought I'm going to turn another one. I really liked it. It's some beautiful Burl wood, and honestly I don't know what it is. But I'm going to put a detail in the very top of the lid, and I'm also going to put a detail between the base and the lid where the connection is. I'll show you that. So let's get to the bandsaw here, and we'll cut this so I can make a box blank out of that. Okay, now I'm going to take my centering tool right here. This is the blank I'm going to use. It's a little bit rectangular, but we'll clean that up. So find a pencil here. Now when you have something that's a little bit more rectangular, it's a good idea to go from all four corners when you make your center mark. And we'll do the same thing on the other end here. So what we end up with is a little box right here in the center. This doesn't have to be perfect. All right. Now I think I'll do one more thing. I'm going to just take the corners off on that. It'll be a little bit easier. It'll be a little bit easier when I get to the lathe and start turning. Okay, now what I'm doing here is I've got my shark jaws, and I'm going to bring up my tail center, get that on the point. And this is going to be a very, very temporary fixing on this. And I wouldn't do a lot of turning on this. I wouldn't turn on this very long. But I'm going to just make a tenon on this end right here. Make sure everything's locked down real good. Okay, now I think the most important part of this video is later on when I make the detail on the lid and the join. And that's going to be more interesting, I think. So here I am just forming a tenon with a very large spindle gouge. This is a Thompson tool that I bought a while ago. I'm cleaning up the end just a little bit, forming a tenon on here, and sometimes I go back and forth and I make a very temporary fixing so I can go do something else with the project I'm working on. Okay, that should be good enough to reverse this. I have a pretty good tenon on there. So the next thing I'm going to do, right there, bring up my tail center once again. Now I'm going to just round this over. Okay, now this is really dusty, so I'm going to hook my dust collection up. All right, now I'm going to try something a little bit different when I'm chucking this up, and I need to make a little groove. I'm not going to put a tenon on here like I ordinarily do. And I'll show you what I've got in mind. I was actually watching Richard Raffin turn a box, and he did something that I thought was really brilliant and worth copying. So I got a little line there in my box blank, and I'm going to put this in here, and that line is going to help me center this blank. That looks pretty good. It's not really a tenon, it's not really a shoulder on there, but I can now tighten this up. I'll clean up the end here, and then I'll decide where to cut this off. This is going to be my lid right here, and let's just make a mark. I would say right in there. That's where I'm going to put that black band of Blackwood in there as a detail. So this will be the base, this will be the top. Okay, so my box blank is in this orientation. There's the lid, there's the base. Okay, as I move along with my project, the first thing I'm going to do right here is take off that temporary tenon. That won't be in the box. And I think that maybe I'll do something a little bit different with the lid. I'm not going to make these two boxes perfectly identical. I'd rather do something a little bit different, and maybe something more like a finial on the very top of that. I'll find some Blackwood. And I'm not sure how readily available Blackwood is anymore. I have some that I bought years ago. Here I am taking my very thin parting tool. This is something I made out of a reciprocating saw blade, and I go down to a point where I can saw this off, and I take my little Japanese pole saw and complete that. And I do have my dust collection going. This is very dusty, and I'm trying to be safe. So we'll cut that off, and I can probably use a stiffer saw, it looks like to me. Now, again, I didn't put a tenon down here because later on I don't really want to have to deal with that. So I think this is a good approach. Now, here's my lid, and I'm going to hollow that out, and I'm going to just take a scraping tool. I don't really even need to drill a depth hole in there. Clean this up with my skew chisel. Okay, periodically you might hear my wife in the background. She's on another lathe, and she comes out once in a while to turn. So anyway, here I am taking a scraping tool. This is actually one that I got from Alan Lacer many years ago. And here is my box scraper, one of them. And this is a great tool for just making that recess fairly parallel. and that's important to do that on this. And then the next step, I'm going to put that join detail in there with that Blackwood. Okay, now I'm going to show you my finished box, and here's the detail I've got on the bottom of that. So there's the side view. Anyway, what's really important is how thick I make this area right in here, because once I add this detail, the inside of that becomes very small. That recess gets a little bit smaller. So I got to be careful not to make this too thick. And it's a good idea to mark that on calipers, because when I go to finish this in here, I could go through that, and I don't want to do that. A box scraper to clean this area up right in here. I'm going to take a little bit more of that wood off. Now this is a really good tool for this operation, but you have to be really careful. It works okay for the side that I'm cutting right now on that recess, but you have to be careful about the end of that tool hitting the bottom of my lid blank. Okay, now I'm taking my double-ended tool. This is a DOA tool. And on this end, it's a negative rake scraper that is ideal for addressing the very bottom of my lid. Now, I'm going to do some sanding in an upcoming clip, and I'm not going to put any finish on this because I need to glue in that Blackwood detail, and I don't want that glue interfering, so you'll see that coming up. I'm putting a couple little grooves in the very bottom of that just to show that I've been there. Okay, and again, here's my dust collector, and I'm just taking some sanding discs. I think I start with maybe 220 and a 320 and call it good. The side doesn't really matter because that's where my Blackwood detail is going to be glued in there. And we'll take that out and proceed to the next step. Okay, so I've got my lid completed up to a point. I don't want to put any finish on here. I've got it sanded. So I'm going to work on the detail right in here, that Blackwood bit that's going to be shown on the outside of that join. Okay, now what I've done is I parted this off, and I've got that join detail piece of wood chucked up here. And I'm going to fix that into the lid right there. So I've got the outside diameter marked on my calipers, and I'm big enough right there. I just need to have that level with this rim area. Now I need to define the inside of that detail. Okay, now I've done a little work off camera, and I need to get this fit right in this area right here. So I'm going to take this down. I've got this marked on my calipers. I'm just about there. And I'm going to square off my tenon. Make it a little bit longer. Okay, now I'm very close to making my connection here. I have just a little bit more to take off. And I've got my diamond parting tool that I've got sharpened at a very good angle right in there, so I can get into this area right in here. And let's try this again. And it's important to leave just a little bit of room for some glue. And I'm going to take this down to the level of my lid. This is actually the bottom part of my lid. And I'm going to take a little bit more of this wood out from the center right here. And I'm going to take my box scraper and take that wood away right in there. Okay, what I'm using to part this off is my handmade parting tool. It's just a reciprocating saw blade, the very narrow edge there. All right, finally. Now, maybe this will make sense now. Here's my lid, and that's that insert that I just made, and I need to take some more wood away from this, and it'll sit like that. That'll be the detail on there. Now, the other important part of this is I can't make this too thin, so I'm going to take a good measurement on right on the inside, and when I put this lid back in my chuck, I can mark that so I don't go too thin on there. All right, that's the next step. So I'm going to put this in my chuck jaws, and if you remember, I made that little line there. And so far, that's been okay. Just enough to line that up right there. That works pretty good. Thank you, Richard Raffin, for another great idea. Well, it's time to prepare my insert that's going to go in the join area. And I'll glue that in just a second. A little bit more turning, and I'm going to make sure I don't go too far on that inside recess and make it too small. I'm cleaning that up. Looks like a skew chisel I'm using. Just doing a push cut and scraping that. And I've got a little burr on that skew chisel, which leaves a very nice surface. So here's my little glue bottle. And I'm going to take this out, and actually I've been turning it without having that glued in, so that worked pretty well. And now I'm going to apply a little glue. So there's a good shot of that Blackwood detail. Put some glue on the Blackwood and also on the inside of that Burl wood. And it doesn't take much for that to tack up. And then I continue and do some more finishing, turning, I should say. So it's glued in there, and I'm making sure I've got that marked correctly. Take a little bit more off in that because I want that recess to be as wide open as I can get it. And you'll see that later when I make the connection between the base and the lid. Just doing a little scrape cut there to finalize that. We'll move on. Okay, I've done just a little hollowing here on the base. Here's my top, and the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make this connection right here. I've just got that started, so I'm going to take a tool and work my way down to that. Now I'm going to watch along with you and kind of explain what I'm doing here. I'm just getting this tenon ready for my lid, and I'm going back and forth, and a lot of this takes quite a while, and I do some of it off camera, and I do some of it with the film speeded up because it gets a little bit tedious just going back and forth. What I have there is that D-Way tool, and on one end it's really perfect for this sort of an operation, and on the other end is a box scraper, and they're both ends are a negative rake scraper. All right, not too bad, just a little tight. Okay, now I've got the camera brought around to a little bit different angle, and I'm continuing to fit the lid on to the base, and this just takes a little bit of time, but there's a good shot of that tool in action, and it's a really, really beautiful tool. Again, it's a D-Way if you're interested, and also Cindy Drozda sells a similar tool that works really well, and she has some beautiful tools on her website. Now what I'm looking for is a good jam fit, and that's not too bad right there. So I need to finish the top of my lid, and I have enough thickness. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put an insert in the top of this, and I'll show you more of that as I move along here. Yeah. Okay, now it's time to do just a little bit of profiling on the outside of my box, and I've got something in mind for a shape. I'm using a skew chisel to just remove a little bit of wood. I'm using a shearing cut, and it takes me a little bit of time because I'm not in any rush to complete the outside of this, and eventually I'm going to have to reverse the base because I have that in that little bit of a fake tenon down there. It's not really a tenon, but I need to blend that in with the surface that I'm working on right now. And this is a good time to practice with a skew. Take a look and see what I've got there. I've got a very good connection there. It's a bit of a jam fit, and I'm not really doing any aggressive cutting on that, and it holds up very well. So let's move on. All right, now I have a little leftover bit of wood here from my first box, and I'm going to put this in the top of my lid. Got that marked on these calipers. Okay. I'm going to take a box scraper. This is a tool I made from an old jointer blade. Okay, now I think this is a pretty important part of this video, showing you this insert into the top of my lid. And from the previous box, I had this bit of wood left over, and I just didn't want to waste it. It was already trimmed to a relatively close dimension, and I keep cutting a little bit and trying it, and I get closer and closer. This does take a while if you've never done this before, but you want to get that fit really as perfect as you can. And I just increase the diameter of that recess little by little. Now, at some point in here, I go to a skew chisel that allows me to level off the very bottom of that area because it was a little bit more convex than I wanted. It was holding the insert out, and I think right there I found that out. So we'll just keep going back and forth. And now you may notice these big clunky glasses. These are actually readers, and I'm waiting for my final eyeglass prescription to come back. Okay, I'm getting closer here. Now that's a pretty good fit right there. And I've got to be careful because my lid is not too thick. Okay. I'm going to take just a little bit more off, and I've resorted to using a skew chisel because it's got a wider edge, and I can level off that surface a little bit easier. Okay, now I am at the final stage of putting my insert into the top of my lid, and we'll move on. We'll glue this in, and we'll do a little bit of final turning on the very top of my Blackwood insert. Blackwood. All right, now all I got to do is glue that in there, and then I'll detail the top of this little bit of Blackwood. Okay, now there's not much I can say about gluing this in. I'll let you watch, and then I'll stick that on there and let it dry and turn the very top of this Blackwood insert. And it doesn't take long for that to just kind of grab. There we go. I'll let that dry. And then we'll do a little detail on the very top of this, and the lid will be finished. I need to apply a little bit of finish on there. Probably round over this edge a little bit. Well, I really enjoy making a box. It's so much fun, and I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm going to bring the camera in, and I'm going to finish the detail on the top here, and I've got to complete the profiling on the base a little bit, so I'm not sure how much of that I'm going to show you, but I will certainly show you some pictures at the very end of this box, and probably the first one I made. So let's get busy and finish this. Okay, now I still have this lid jammed on here. I'm going to take a small detail gouge, a spindle gouge, and clean this up and do just a little bit of shaping on this detail. Okay, so I had a little mishap. It's coming real soon here as I detail this bit of Blackwood, and it's always fun, at least for you. I'm glad you stayed this long to see this, so here it comes. And there it is in the corner. Okay, that certainly was fun. I'm going to leave that in because that gives me the opportunity to show you something. Okay, I'm going to take a tissue, and if this connection were so bad that I had to use something thicker than just a tissue, that connection probably would not be very good. So anyway, I've got a little bit of water on that. I'm going to go back and jam my lid on. Take the rest of this away. And I think I'm on there okay, and that is going to hold. So let's try this again, shall we? Round over that corner on the top of the lid. And I'm going to take a point tool and make a little detail in here, right where the blackwood connects with the top of my lid. And I think I'll make a bead. Right there, yeah. All right. I'm going to continue with my detail up here. All right. I think that's where I want to be there. I'm going to try to keep this detail very simple. I don't want to get too fancy with that. It doesn't need to be. So I'll get ready and put a little finish on there and do a little bit of sanding. It will be done. For a little finish, I ran across a container of water locks, which is a really good finish. I haven't used it too much lately. So I'm going to just start with a little of this water locks on the lid, and I'm not going to worry too much about the base because I've got to reverse that. And I'll buff that in. And I will certainly give this 2 or 3 more coats of some sort of finish. And then maybe wax it at the end. Yeah, it's really pretty wood. Need to clean this out right here. Anyway, let's move on to the base and we'll finish that. I'm very happy with this little box that I made, and came out very well. I just wish I knew what kind of wood it was. Maybe that's not terribly important. So I have the base jammed onto a piece of waste wood. Just formed a little bit of a jam fit connection there, and I really like to finish things on the lathe when they're spinning. So anyway, there it is. I'm going to show you some additional pictures at the very end. So I appreciate you watching, and please subscribe and leave a comment. Give me some ideas on another video. Yeah, I'm going back to the shop and make something else in another video. Thanks.